Well, now I want to turn to another regular on our show, Martin Brechbiel, MMR, who is building a maintenance away car for us. Martin, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Can't hear you, Martin.
Are you there?
I'm here. Are you?
I'm debating it.
Both?
So it's unclear as yet. Let's see if I can get my screen to share. How's that working?
Building cars.
There we go. I got it right the first try. It's so I haven't been here for a while, but it's oddly enough, I'm Scrratchbuilding another maintenance away car. Fancy that. Maintenance away car number 312, I think, or whatever number it is this week. Next week, it'll be a different number.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning. Well, I'm going to skip forward because that's where my starting point was, because I had a stack of these prefabbed flat car blanks sitting on my back in the back of my bench. And we're going to come back to this probably, I don't know, a month or two or three in the future, which somebody named Jim twisted my arm into presenting something about underbody brake details and the confabulations I go through on installing these things and where you buy parts and pieces and bits and bobs and how you put them together and how not to avoid self-medicating after you go insane from doing this. So that said, and that doesn't include the truss rod stuff because I know I did a show just about truss rods once. So that's the starting point. And I do prefab 3 or 4 of these at a time sometimes or more, and I just stack them up in the back of my bench and figure I'll use them next week, next month, well, probably not much further out than next month. So I'm going to cut 2 sides out. It's just plain old scribe siding. Actually, this is scraps because you can see I glued them up together here. I don't, my cursor's going to work. It does. And you can see a glue line there. I know where the glue lines are. I don't throw away scraps. I reuse them. I have bags and boxes and all kinds of things. Whatever it came out of, it goes back into it. I know which one is which, so they stay pretty well close to matched. 2 ends, they're strangely enough the width of the car. The sides are taller than the ends because they're going to extend over the sides of the flat car and cover up the sides. So they need to be a little bit longer. So assembling this might be a little tricky for some because you can't just lay it right side up on your flat work surface. You get a really sharp knife and a really good ruler, and a straight edge, and a right angle tool, and you can mark out where your windows and doors go. I'm fairly arbitrary on this to some extent. Yeah, no, there is no prototype for what I'm doing. This is seat of the pants. Those are Tichy castings. It's a 5-panel door, and I think those are actually work car windows. Tichy actually makes work car windows. So yeah, I buy a lot of those just for fun. I don't like making windows if I can help it. But yeah, just mark these all out, the width of the width of the back of the casting, and cut them out. I'm using a number 22 or 23 scalpel on a number 11 scalpel blade on a straight edge. No blood was spilled in the course of this. Open the holes up, test fit things, make sure they fit. I usually cut things a little small because if you cut it too big, that's a problem because then you have to go back and fill the hole up. And filling the hole, making a bigger hole is a lot easier than filling a hole. So if I make it a little narrow, that's okay. We'll just take the number 11 scalpel and shave off a few tenths of a millimeter until the casting drops in snugly. You don't want to force it. You don't want it to fall out either. So once you have that done, we've got these parts. So just for fun, I put framing around the windows to simulate that these might actually slide across and to open as opposed to anything else. They are flat windows in the glass anyhow. So I've just added that to it. That's probably a HO 2x4. I use a lot of HO lumber, scale lumber in my O-scale cars, basically because if the size looks good and it fits the space, it's the right size. I don't really worry about if the packet says O or HO. As long as it works, I'm happy. So that's just on there with some carpenter's glue. And just for fun, I had to put some sunshades over the windows and the doors. Well, not doors. It's just 10 thousandths brass. It's a little fun bending into a Z. I actually used a straight edge a straight edge pair of pliers. I've forgotten the specific technical name for what those types of pliers are, but they're not tapered. They're absolutely perfectly straight on both sides. So you can just bend stuff in them. And if you're moderately careful, you can do a decent job of it. I didn't want to be more than moderately careful because I want some ripples in it. I want it to look a little crude. I want it to look like somebody grabbed some sheet metal out of the scrap metal around the back of the shop, hit it over the head with a mallet on the anvil and got it to set something that said, oh, that'll work. Stop there. Just glue that in place with some goo and CA, and it's not coming back off. The nut bolt washer castings were drilled through it and stuck in there. They're not to hold that stuff in place. They're just purely ornamental. But now we've got two sides, two ends, and it's time to put things together. It's a little tricky, but strangely enough, it actually does come together. And the point, you got to be careful, is you want to align these tops, that edge with the outside of this edge. So your roof sheathing actually comes down and is flush on the outside. We're close to that, but or whatever tool of destruction you want to use, and smooth it to whatever shape you really like. But once assembled, it just slides down over the flat car sits on the decking nice and smooth. And you can see, just for fun, I've added some bracing around the corners, and there's a piece on the back here because it's just nothing there to hold that back end down. And that's all down there with just a little bit of carpenter's glue. Just slide on it. I put a couple of steel weights on top of it to hold it in place. And yeah, I actually added this piece of wider bracing above the door to keep that piece from splitting. Things have a way of splitting over short distances in scribe siding at the most inconvenient possible time while you're using it. That may be true whether or not it's 1/16 inch scribe siding or 1/32 thick, but just when you don't want it to break at the most critical moment, it tends to be when it will. So throwing a piece of bracing where no one will notice it discourages that from happening. If you can do it quickly, it's worth doing. Well, we put roofing on it. This is some scribe siding, maybe the same scribe siding, in fact. Scribe siding down, so what little of it can be seen, you're not going to see the top anyhow. What little of the scribing marks can be seen will be, you have to flip the car over and look underneath of it. What little bit overhangs here, you can actually see a little bit of it here. Some strip wood for trim work, wrapped all the way around 360 degrees. Just have to cut bevel, angles and bevels and stuff here. Come on, cursor, behave there. It's not a big deal. Sharp knife, number 10 or number 15 scalpel blade works wonders for cutting these things. That's a 15 scalpel blade, not a number 15 X-Acto blade. They're not the same thing when you get to number 15. And I've added some build-up ladders. These are laser cut little kit pieces from BTS. They're mildly annoying to put together. They look good once you got them together. They're mildly annoying because the rungs are a little wider than the openings in the sides of the ladder. So you have to go back and adjust every single rung so it drops in place, it stays where you want it to. And when you build 4 of them, it takes a little bit of time. It's not impossible, it just takes time. So there's 2 more. And you can see I had to bevel these down a little bit so they actually fit in the sides of the ladders. Otherwise, they just don't fit in the hole. That's my biggest complaint about laser cut items, is that sometimes things don't fit in the holes. They laser cut a hole for you, but it's 10% small. And then they make 400 of them or 4,000 of them. And that's all you can find on the market, though. Well, in any case, that's where we're at. I think I may or may stop here, in fact. Hey, guess what? I am stopping here. So this is a quick build. I'm going to do this in 2 sessions. And we're going to avoid deep philosophical discussions on parts and dimensions thereof. It's more to demonstrate you can put something together pretty quickly if you want to. So if there's questions, now's the time to throw them at me. Give me a chance to duck first.
And Martin, this is Jeff Jordan. I got a question for you using the scribed siding.
Yeah.
Do you do something to prevent it from splitting when you're cutting in the windows and door openings, like pre-drilling the corners or putting tape on the back or something like that?
Nope.
So it's thick enough that it's not going to split on you?
Well, I've been doing it. I've been cutting it for 20 years with scalpel blades, and you take your time with it. Yeah, startled me. Spotlighted me. No, I tend to cut a cross grain first, and then down the other directions.
Oh, that makes sense.
So yeah, leave the direction with the grain intact until you're ready for it to go. So you want to relieve the stress on it by cutting cross grain first. Cross grains cutting is harder, but it's you make 5, 6, 7 passes until you get it to come through the other side, and then I'll cut the with the grain directions. And it's usually there's at least one of those who is not on the scribe mark, so you do need a steel ruler to make sure you're close to straight.
Martin, I'm going to ask you a question that I know there's no perfect answer to, but I know that you're so intelligent and so brave that you're going to have the answer. When you cut this with the scalpel,
Yeah,
how much pressure do you put on the scalpel?
quite a lot, actually. Probably a lot more than you're supposed to use with a scalpel, because they are moderately fragile, but that's experience. I mean, you can push them pretty good. You can push them. I'm not sure you can push them as hard as you can push a X-Acto blade, but I've broken one of those. I've broken those a couple of times, but that was a very, very long time ago. It's also good to have, and I do, at least 3 of each blade I'm using in handles at the same time. I have 7 or 8, maybe 9 scalpels on my bench at any given moment. And the handles actually have colored tape on them, so I know which one's which on age. As it gets worn, I set that one aside for other purposes, and they get dull fairly quickly. They're not designed for cutting wood. Flesh tends to be their forte. But yeah, so using the number 11, yeah, or when I'm cutting thicker stuff, the number 22 or number 23, that's the next size up handle. It's a much larger blade.
But what I'm trying to get at is, you said if you're cutting cross grain, you may take 3, 4, 5, 6 different cuts. How much pressure per cut? In other words, I know that you can put enough pressure on it to make one cut and it's through.
No,
but you're putting enough pressure on it to get 1/5 of the way through each time you slice it. Now, my question to you is, how much is that pressure?
Oh, gosh, I wish I knew how to measure that. I don't have a tool for that. That's practice and experience. I mean, you just have to try it. But I'll tell you, the first 2 or 3 cuts, you're not putting a lot of pressure on it because you want to stay on your line. You do not want it to wander off wherever, wherever being perhaps your thumb or other fingers, but on your other hand. So the first couple of cuts, you're really more engraving, etching.
You're almost laying the scalpel on the wood and just kind of dragging it across.
Well, the first one is really, you're drawing a line that you can see. You're putting a groove in the wood so you can actually see. Okay, now made my initial cut. I've drawn my line with the scalpel blade. The next one you can put a little more depth into because it's going to stay in that groove you just cut. So that first time you draw the scalpel across is the one you're using to really describe where you want that blade to go in the future.
I think, Martin, you're trying to tell them that it's your guide point, the first cut.
Yeah.
Guide you.
Yeah, that's really what the first one is. It's a guide point.
Yeah, the other thing I think that, just a comment, Martin, that depending on the wood you're cutting, if you cut where the grain is running into the knife, so that, if the grain is running away from the knife as you're cutting, it'll pull the knife away from your straight edge here. If the grain is running in the grain of the wood, sometimes you turn the wood 180 degrees.
Yes.
It's better to cut because you want the grain to run into the knife so that it pulls the knife against the straight edge versus the grain running away where it pulls it away from the straight edge. Because that's what'll get you off track really quickly, is the grain of the wood grabbing the knife and pulling it away from the straight edge. So look at that when you cut. Always make sure you're cutting that. And I don't know what to call it. It's like the grain has to run into the knife, so it's dragging the knife into the straight edge. Anyway,
I'm sure there's a technical name for it, but you're right. And but that's why you want to do your first 2 or 3 cuts to avoid that. We want to avoid ruining your cut and cutting yourself. It's safety second or first. It depends on how valuable the piece of wood is. It also matters, as I was going to say, depends on what kind of wood it is. I mean, most of the time we're talking about basswood, or some of us may be using balsa. Some of the dimensional lumber I have is actually red cedar. Some of it's pine, not sugar pine. It's white pine. Kapler used to sell all kinds of different types of wood in O scale, HO scale, dimensional lumber. And while I have that on the tip of my tongue, Kapler's up for sale. Yeah. So anybody who wants to go into business of producing lumber for modeling, talk to Eric at Kapler. He wants to sell you his company.
This is something, this may seem like a trivial kind of thing, but it's something that I had to spend a lot of time and effort learning. Now, maybe it comes with experience. Maybe I'm a slow learner. I don't know. But I have ruined a lot of cuts before I finally figured out how to try to get them to where I didn't destroy what I was trying to cut before I needed to.
That's really the foundation of modeling. I mean, there's more to building than just gluing things together.
Yeah. And there's more to building than just, we talk about, I cut out the window and cut out the door, and, I've been doing it 20 years. It's no big deal, but it is a huge deal. For a guy that is trying to figure out, I want to build that car that I just saw Martin build, and oh geez, I just broke the wood because I pushed too hard or whatever.
Well, I do break one occasionally. It does happen. I guarantee you, things happen. And sometimes I do break the scalpel blade too. I broke one yesterday. Yeah. And got lucky. The blade went, the one end went one way and the rest of it went over there, and neither one hit me or anything else important. That was a number 10. So, there's several types of blades. It takes practice using them all. And as I noted, the number 15 I use, the scalpel, it's not the same as a 15 X-Acto blade. It's like a miniature number 10. And I find that to be an incredibly useful blade for separating laser cut parts from the surrounding wood. And I was putting together a park bench, laser cut park bench, very ornate scroll work on the ends today. I could barely see all the little tiny scrolls on it, but I was looking for the piece to cut, but the number 15 was the one to use. And it's very handy to have a variety of these blades. I mean, just keeping the number 11 and number 10 around on the bench, be it X-Acto or not, that's probably not enough. I do like having the 22 or the 23. It looks like a small kitchen knife, but it's very good for cutting large lumber. And of course, if I get larger than that, I just go to the bandsaw.
Yeah, Martin, I think the biggest thing we have to remember is to have a sharp tool all the time.
Yes. Well,
If you
that's why I
don't,
said,
more
yeah.
people get cut from dull tools than they are from the sharp one.
Yeah, it's don't be afraid to change the blades in these things, because dull one, and that's why I said I keep 3 of them, 3 11s and 3 10s on my bench, but I know which one's which because I color code the handles when I change the blades out. And when I want the one that's good enough, I'll get the one that's good enough. But if I want, like, when I'm cutting the fresh, when I'm cutting like a painted tar paper roof overhang, the excess that's been glued onto a car, I'm going to reach for my brand new blade because that's painted paper. It's thin, but I don't want to tear the paper. I want a perfectly clean cut without any resistance beyond it. So, that one, I will get a brand new blade, cut that. I'll show you what I'm talking about next week, but where I did that. But it's, there's a time and a place for changing blades, and when in doubt, change it.
Got it. Martin, thank you so very much. I didn't want to bother you with trivial questions.
Oh,
To me, this is important. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, this year I sprung for a box of 120 blades rather than buying them 5 at a time. And you're in the middle of the project and you use up the 5th blade. I no longer worry about it. I've got 100 blades left in the box, and if I think it's getting dull, I chuck it and put on another one.
Yep. I'm getting, I'll be buying, I buy a box of 100. And don't even blink, just keep going. It's better to have a good tool in your hand that's sharp and ready to use than take, risk making a mess.
It is. No question.
And remember, the mess might be you. So that roll of adhesive tape in the shop can be useful as well.
Thanks so much, Martin. I appreciate it.